Welcome back to Dom's Roundtable, my brothers. Today, as promised, we shall be taking a look at how to defeat every single enemy in the game. Ever since I created this style of video for Helldivers 2 and obtaining over 3 million views on that one video alone, it's been much requested that I recreate it for similar games. So here it is to help you deal with every single Tyranid and Chaos Warrior currently in Space Marine 2. And of course we will start off with the Tyranids. The bread and butter of the Tyranid army is the Hormagaunts and the Termagants. Swarms of these two types of Tyranids make up the bulk of most engagements. And though they will literally go down in a couple of attacks from any damage source, they are not to be trifled with. Considering the sheer volume of them, they can very easily overwhelm you, especially when backed up with some of the larger, more terrifying Tyranid threats. They can be easily staggered, especially with stomps, and you always want to make sure you go for them executions or the gun strikes to keep your armor topped up, because whilst you have even the tiniest smidge of armor, the next attack will not deal any health damage to you. Your armor must be fully stripped away before you start taking health damage. So if overwhelmed and you don't have any big AoE attacks like a melter rifle or a grenade, just keep getting in your parries, keep getting in your gun strikes, and you will basically keep yourself topped up at full health and chip away very slowly at the swarm surrounding you. Obviously this is easier said than done with the Termagants because they are the ranged version of these warriors, and they will stand back at the edge of the swarm just peppering you with fire and chipping away at your health. Either keep rolling towards them and focus them down first because these are definitely far more annoying, or ideally shoot them with one of your ranged weapons so you can deal with them without having to wade through the swarm. And obviously you always have two allies work together, and neither of these should cause you any issues at all. And finally, before we move on to the actual genuine Tyranid threats of the game, please note that during certain defensive sections, the Hormagaunts can also form piles of bodies climbing up the walls. When you see them doing this, try and move around to a different location, because if you try to shoot them from directly above where they are coming from, for some reason the hitbox is a bit weird and you won't be able to easily destroy the source. So move round to a different vantage point. Grenades and explosives are particularly effective in these situations, because if you shoot the piles of them at the bottom, the rest of the tower will collapse and they won't be able to reach you as easily. Next up, we have got Spore Mines. These can be as much of an advantage for you as they can be for your enemies, because unlike Space Marines, all enemies take friendly fire. So if a warrior with a venom cannon tries to shoot you and one of his friends gets in the way, he will shoot his friend instead. And equally, if you blow up a Spore Mine, they will cause a chain reaction, blowing all of themselves up along with any other Tyranids caught in the blast. So as long as you always keep your eyes peeled and don't let the Spore Mines get too close to you, they can be as much of an advantage as they are a hindrance. Next up, we'll take a look quickly at Rippers and Gargoyles. I will only skim over these two briefly because as of right now, they can both only appear in the campaign. Rippers are an absolute pain in the arse and can only be effectively dealt with by the Pyroblaster. This is a weapon, again, currently exclusive to the campaign, and you basically just have to keep spraying the area with hundreds and hundreds worth of pyro ammo. Eventually, you will clear the swarm, leaving yourself with some breathing room, but they will come back pretty quickly. So whatever objectives you have in the area, just get them done quickly and get out. Please also note that sometimes the Rippers will mass into a swarm and then surge over you like a tidal wave. A prompt will pop up just like any other unparryable attack, and if you roll at the right time, it can be very easily dodged. But just keep spraying your Pyroblaster again and again, get through these sections as quickly as possible, and hopefully the Rippers won't give you too much trouble. And next up for the Gargoyles. Again, these aren't regular enemies, they only appear during certain sequences of the campaign, and they basically start trying to rip apart mission critical equipment. Therefore, you just want to eliminate these swarms as quickly as possible. The most efficient and effective way to do this is the grenade launcher attachment on the bolt rifle. And once you've dealt with them in these few campaign sequences, you will never see them again, unless they come up in future operations, but let's hope not. Next up, we're finally onto the fun enemies, the Majoris and Extremis variants of the Tyranids. Firstly, let's look at the Tyranid Warriors, of which I believe there are 4 variants. The 2 melee variants, one with twin bone swords and one with a sword and a whip. Both of them can be dealt with in very, very similar ways. If you're familiar with the likes of Sekiro or other rhythm-based fighting games, you will find you're right at home with the Tyranid Warriors and other similar enemies, because basically you're just playing a rhythm game. You are being quite passive for the most part, unless you have your relic level weapons equipped, and you can just annihilate them in 3 melter rifle shots. But apart from that, on the harder difficulties, whilst you're leveling a new class and you've only got common or uncommon weapons, you're basically just getting a few pot shots off here and there whilst playing quite reactionary and waiting for the dodge and the parry prompts, getting off as many perfect dodges and perfect parries as you can, because as soon as you trigger a gun strike, you're going to deal a phenomenal amount of damage and whittle them down into the execute state very, very quickly. In the late game, however, when your class and your weapons are pretty much maxed out, just to give you one example, using my level 8 tactical with my legendary melter rifle and my Auspex scan, I can put these in execute range in 1 or 2 attacks. So at this point you can get very aggressive, and they become just as pathetic as Hormagaunts and Termagants. Next up, we have got the ranged variants, and my mistake, after double checking, there are 3 ranged variants. The ones that will shoot the seed pods that burst into barbed wire, the ones that have a spray of flesh-eating maggots, they are the Devourer variant, and also the ones I hate the most, the Venom Cannon, because if you don't dodge out of the way of the Venom Cannon, that thing deals an insane amount of damage and will instantly strip all of your armor. Pretty much all of them can be dealt with in the exact same way as the melee variants, and in fact, if you manage to run up to them and tie them up in melee combat, they'll be even easier than the melee variants to tackle, because their melee attacks just aren't as powerful. So you can quite easily stunlock these to death, especially if there's 2 of you mobbing them. A few tips to help you with each variant. For the one that shoots the barbed wire, not only will a stim pack immediately clear the toxin effect, should you get affected with toxin, but also any gunshot on the center of each cluster of barbed wire will immediately clear it for you. So that makes their one and only scary attack instantly so easy to deal with. The Devourer is definitely the easiest of the 3 variants to deal with. I don't really need to give you any specific tips for them. And finally, for the Venom Cannon, if you know you have some Venom Cannon wielding Tyranid Warriors around, just be extra vigilant of that beam and make sure you're dodging frequently, because as long as that beam doesn't hit you, then this variant is just as easy to deal with as the other 4 Tyranid Warrior variants. Next up is the Zoanthrope. These are powerful flying psychic Tyranids that will channel the energy of the warp to attack you. They can buff nearby Tyranids, and they have a plethora of very scary attacks if you don't know how to deal with them. However, as soon as you do, they're actually probably one of my favourite enemies to fight, because they become trivial as soon as you know what to do. Firstly, if you're only fighting one, they are very easy to just quickly burst down with powerful ranged attacks and then run up and execute them. They only have 2 real attacks, both are telegraphed with the red unblockable aura, so you can easily dodge out the way of them. The easier of the 2 to dodge is a high damage beam that will go in a straight line, so literally just run left or right and you will dodge it. The other one, they spit 3 green moving explosive pulses at you, which you do need to dodge out the way of, because they can be pretty deadly if they hit you. Apart from dodging these attacks and dealing with the superpowered Tyranids that they keep buffing, just burst them down with ranged attacks and then get in for a finisher. Apart from that, the only other thing you need to know is sometimes they will be summoned in pairs, and they will protect each other with psychic shields. The psychic shields can technically be broken, but it's very inefficient to do this. So just keep focusing down the Zoanthrope that isn't currently shielded, and eventually you will get them both into finisher state and you can finish them off. And as we're already talking about the Zoanthrope, I will quickly just say as well, the Neurothrope works the exact same way, except they are the boss variant. They are much more powerful, and they also have a few point-blank range attacks. So you can't run in and burst them down with the melter rifle or something like that. You will need to rely entirely on very ranged attacks, because they have some very scary, very damaging close range attacks. And the one other difference is they will drop to the floor and then they are vulnerable to some melee damage, and this is when you can get some really big damage off on them. However, be careful, because as with the Hive Tyrants, they release waves of green energy that you need to time your rolls and roll through to get close enough to them for them to stop doing this attack. If you don't, they will eventually stop doing this attack, but you also lose your opportunity to get in that big burst of melee damage. Before we move into the next enemy, if you're enjoying this video, my brothers, and you want the Emperor to favor you in the upcoming battles ahead, make sure you subscribe to Dom's Roundtable. We are nearly at 250,000 members, and it would be so epic if this video could be the one that gets us to 250,000 strong. And it's not just Space Marine 2 content I'll be covering, my friends. Oh no, I do various guides and other gaming content for all your favorite upcoming releases to help take the grind out of your games so you can spend more time doing what you love and actually enjoying the games you play. And finally, for all of you who have already subscribed to the channel, you are incredible. I appreciate you so much, and thank you, my brothers. Oh, also, a few upcoming games that I am going to be covering, if you're curious why you should stick around for the future, are Borderlands 4, Stalker 2, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Enotria The Last Song, maybe the new Dragon Age if it doesn't turn out to be a pile of shite, and Killing Floor 3, just to name a few. Next up, we'll look at Raveners. Raveners are very similar to Tyranid Warriors, except they have a tail instead of legs, and they are capable of rapidly burrowing underground and appearing almost instantly to try and grab you. They are just as squishy as Tyranid Warriors, however it doesn't feel like they are because they frequently burrow underground, so it's hard to deal enough damage to quickly get them into the execute state. Sometimes if the three of you synergize, you can easily stun lock them and kill them almost instantly. However, if you don't, just be ready to roll and dodge their grab attacks, because if you do get grabbed, you have to spam a quick time event to get out of the grab, and they deal significant damage to you whilst you are grabbed. Apart from that though, they're definitely the easiest of the extremist enemies, and nowhere near as challenging as the next enemy we'll talk about, the Lictors. Where Raveners can burrow, Lictors can go invisible. If you fail to dodge their leaping grab attack, you will need to do the same quick time event that you do for the Raveners to get out of their claws, and they have some pretty quick and pretty powerful combos that are quite hard for inexperienced players to dodge and parry. However, if you do get used to dodging and parrying them, then they become not too much more difficult than Raveners, especially if you have a tactical on your squad, because the Auspex scan will stop them from cloaking, which basically eliminates their one and only advantage, and makes them not too much more of a challenge then. Again, sometimes it can be hard to do this, but another way to track their progress and keep an eye on them is by sticking a crack grenade to them, which will also almost instantly put them in a finisher state. So tactical marines and crack grenades are a great way to shut down these otherwise very intimidating enemies. Next up is the Carnifex. The Carnifex don't have many different attacks, but the attacks they do have can be really painful if you don't dodge at the right time. Also, they just have an absolute ton of health, meaning this really will be a war of attrition and you need to focus 100% of the time not to get caught out. Now, if you are progressing through operations slowly, carefully and cautiously, you can spot a Carnifex before it has fully aggroed, and if you have ranged weapons and you can start shooting it from quite far away, then you can actually force it to just stick to its ranged attacks, where it spits 3 volleys of spines at you. They are quite low damage, and you can literally just dodge left and right to avoid them all. This way, the 3 of you can just keep bursting it down with range attacks until it's in finisher range. This is definitely the easiest way to deal with Carnifexes, so if you think there is one round the corner, approach really slowly and you may be able to get it locked into this ranged only attack pattern. However, if not, then perfect dodges are your best friend. Pretty much every single attack it does is telegraphed with the red aura and is definitely unparryable, so you just want to stay out of its way and perfect dodge as much as you can. it tends to lock onto one member of your team for quite some time, just like the Hive Tyrant does. So have one member of your team focus on dodging and rolling and running away as much as possible, while the other two do their best to burst it down and just keep switching roles every time it switches targets. Next up, we have the Hive Tyrant, which is currently specific to one operation, and this shares many similarities with the Carnifex. However, as I said earlier, it also has that pulsing wave attack of the Neurothropes when it's in phase 2. So really, you just need to employ all of your tactics from the Carnifex with that one specific sequence of the Neurothrope, and you've already countered 95% of the Hive Tyrant's attacks. It isn't as intimidating as it seems, it's just very fast, and it does a lot of damage if it manages to catch you out. The only other thing it can do is it will throw out green scythe-shaped waves of energy at you, which you need to roll out of the way. You do, I believe, get a small amount of iframes when you roll, so you should be able to roll through these attacks, just like you roll through the green pulsing waves. Apart from that, patience, reactionary gameplay, and being on the defensive is absolutely key with Hive Tyrants, as it is with the Carnifex. And then finally, I will quickly touch on the Heldrake, which again is exclusive to one specific operation, and this is as simple as matching 3 of the 5 consoles, which have the same symbols as the ones lit up on the wall behind it. Each time you light up the 3 symbols, it will become stunned, and you'll be able to shoot it with ranged attacks for a few seconds, and you just repeat this until it's dead. It is nowhere near as intimidating as it first seems. And that's it for how to deal with every single Tyranid. So now let's move on to the Chaos. Also, I just realized, judging by the name, I'm pretty sure the Heldrake is a Chaos construct, not a Tyranid one. But whatever, it's a boss. You now know how to kill it. Let's move on to the Chaos. Now we move on to the Chaos section of the video, of whom there are far fewer variations. And for the most part, they all require the same tactics, so this will be a lot quicker. We start off with the bog standard Cultist. This is the Chaos variation of the Termagant. However, they die far quicker, taking only 1 shot from, I believe, every single weapon in the game. The Bulwark can even literally just explode them by running into them holding your shield up. They are pathetically easy to kill, however they can be quite powerful as they do snipe you with their lasguns and they can throw grenades. So as long as they're not hidden behind walls of other enemies, focus fire them down first because they will melt instantly and you will have dealt with a huge threat very easily. The other unit that makes up the bread and butter of the Chaos is the Tzaangors. These are akin to the Beastmen, but they've been changed and warped by Chaos, and they're kind of like part man, part bird, part goat. And they fill a similar role to the Hormagaunts. However, quite a few of them carry shields, which makes them an absolute pain for certain classes. And they are the primary reason that Chaos tend to be harder than the Tyranids to fight. Not because of the Terminators or the Sorcerers or even the Helbrutes. These guys and their bloody shields. They are so annoying because they can and will block most attacks unless you use something like an explosion, a stomp, or a shoulder charge to knock them off balance. So deal with big groups of them accordingly by stringing together heavy attacks to knock them off balance and swiftly kill them so they stop being a nuisance and you can focus on the bigger threats. Next up, filling in the role of the Tyranid Warriors is the Rubic Marines. There are 2 variations of these, and both of them are far less annoying and painful than their Tyranid Warrior counterparts. Some of them wield bolters and some of them wield flamers. The flamers are much more of a pain because it's very hard to get up close because they can and will melt your armor. However, the bolters' attacks are very telegraphed and very easy to dodge. But apart from that, and the fact that they can teleport, if you can deal with Tyranid Warriors, then you can deal with these guys. Just dodge and parry their attacks accordingly, and apart from that, use your gun strikes and fight them in a very similar manner to the way you would the Tyranid Warriors, and you will very easily and very quickly have them in finisher range. Next up, we have Lesser Sorcerers and Exalted Sorcerers. They draw upon their ruinous powers to not only deal tremendous amounts of damage from range, but they can also resurrect Rubic Marines. Despite the fact that they float around, unlike Zoanthropes, they can pretty much always be meleeed because they hover much closer to the ground than Zoanthropes do. They do also have a potent beam attack, though this is telegraphed and can again be dodged. For the most part, the lesser versions especially really don't pose all that much of a threat. They are surprisingly squishy once you break their eye-shaped shield, and their attacks are very easily telegraphed and dodged or parried. Again, just like the Rubic Marines, watch out because they will teleport around, but the lesser variant at least goes down without putting up too much of a fight. And talking of the Exalted Sorcerers, it can be very hard to tell when you're fighting which one, because they both look and act incredibly similar. In fact, I don't think they even have any additional attacks. The only reason you really know is if one of your bots ping them, or if one of your Marines verbally calls it out. You can tackle them in the exact same way, just be careful because their attacks do pack more of a punch, and they have quite a lot more health. Though they are still nowhere near as bad as the regular Zoanthropes, because even if you are unlucky enough to face two of them at a time, they won't shield each other like the Zoanthropes, so they will still go down pretty damn quickly. Next up, we have both the melee and ranged version of the Scarab Occult Terminator. Until you learn how to tackle these guys, some of the toughest enemies in the game, because they're so easy to underestimate. They look quite similar to Rubic Marines, just bigger and clunkier, so you treat them as such, and you really can't because they will mess you up. Firstly, the ranged Terminators are armed with a rapid-firing main weapon and then either a Soul Reaper cannon or an autocannon. They are very hard to take out alone because they're pretty much impossible to stagger, and they chain attacks together so frequently, so you are always either dodging or parrying something. So really, they are best approached through jolly cooperation. Much like our tactic for the Carnifex, whichever team member they are currently focusing on, have the others nuke them down as quickly as possible. The ranged ones aren't as terrifying if you do manage to lock them down in melee. However, you then also have the melee version of the Terminator, which is terrifying. They will attack with multiple consecutive blows, and they attack fast and frequently, and they also have a spinning whirlwind attack which drives them forward, which you cannot parry. This must be dodged. And there is actually an achievement if you do manage to parry one of their combos, because unfortunately just one perfect parry doesn't end their sequence of attacks. You need to perfect parry the entire sequence. So they are really scary in melee. In fact, you want to apply the exact opposite tactics of the ranged Terminators and try and blast them with your ranged weapons, with your bombs, and don't let them get too close to you until you get very, very comfortable and proficient at parrying and dodging all of their attacks. And finally, as I already stupidly covered the Heldrake as part of the Tyranids, we have got the Helbrute. These are the warped, twisted remains of dreadnoughts. A little bit of lore for you: dreadnought walkers are actually piloted by great heroes of a chapter who have been wounded beyond repair and are very close to death. They are then placed in dreadnoughts which have lots of high-tech life support technology which keeps these loyal heroes alive, so they can continue to enact the Emperor's will. However, these dreadnoughts are then twisted by the powers of chaos into a nightmarish state of undeath, driving those trapped within the machine insane. Helbrutes show up as boss fights twice throughout the campaign, and they can show up as bosses in operations as well. All of their attacks are very, very powerful, so again, as with the Carnifex and the Tyrant, make sure you play this fight very reactionary and very defensively. Their plasma cannon attacks can be easily dodged, and this involves 4 sequential shots with a gap in between each. However, their real scary attacks come from their Thunder Hammer. Due to their moveset, it's sometimes really hard to telegraph exactly when you're supposed to be dodging, and alongside that, they will quite often cause a large radius around them to become electrified and then explode. So really, you don't want to be fighting these things in close range unless you're an absolute god at dodging and you're really good at reading them. So again, just as with the Tyrants, whichever Space Marine is currently being targeted, just roll and pray for your dear life, whilst the other two try and obliterate the Helbrute from range. However, please beware, just as many other Chaos units, the Helbrute also has the ability to teleport, and usually he'll teleport outside of your field of vision and then immediately make a melee attack which needs dodging. So if you see him disappear, start rolling in the hopes of dodging this, unless you are very, very good at spinning your camera around instantly to make a more telegraphed dodge. That is it for my top tips for how to deal with all of the enemies currently in the game. And as new strategies that make some of these enemies easier come out, I will of course revisit with shorter videos with updated segments as well. But for now, all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.